This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Brett Dolan from Touchdown Radio and Arkansas Athletics. Don't worry, Brett. I didn't mean you were going to ruin the show. You're going to do just fine here for the next 15 minutes or so. Just like you did last week when you called Southern California at Cal. And unexpectedly, it looked like you might have watched the most interesting game of the weekend last week.
I think I watched the most interesting game of the year. I mean, when you start to factor in all the craziness, 50-49, and USC avoids Cal getting a 2-point conversion to win. Had Cal just kicked an extra point, we would have gone to overtime, Phil, 50-50. Each team more than 500 total yards. This doesn't even factor in a game starting late because of protesters at midfield, or starting the second half with the first or the last play of the second half 20 minutes later before we kicked off. So there was enough nonsense to fill up a notebook full of stories, but it was wildly entertaining.
Why did they begin the second half with the last play of the second quarter? What happened there?
Well, USC threw a pass, and they were hoping to have a second left to call timeout and kick a field goal, and they said nope, they ran out of time. So they go into the locker room. They don't start the halftime locker or the clock, the countdown. And while they're in the halftime locker room, they're looking at multiple angles, and they think, wait a minute, his knee did touch. There should be a second. So they call the coaches out and say, by the way, we're going to have a field goal try before we kick off to start the third quarter. The best part was, Phil, the USC kicker comes out. He must have tried it 20 times. The long snapper, the holder, they're out there, they're kicking. Sure enough, 25 minutes later, he misses the kick. And then we have the kickoff to start the third quarter. It was one of a kind.
Well, who you got this? Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Brett. The playoff poll finally came out, and I was just going to get your thoughts on that, and if you thought that Oregon was the best one-loss team they had. But Oregon is the best one-loss team, and LSU as the best two-loss team. If you agreed with those.
I do, and I think Oregon, the funny part is Oregon's playing better than Washington even though they lost to them. Texas is playing better than Oklahoma even though they lost to them. So I'm not surprised. You know, the worthlessness of this first poll is that you have to go on resume, and Ohio State's had 2 nice wins at Notre Dame, against Penn State. Things will even out once some of these backloaded schedules start kicking in for Michigan, or Michigan and Ohio State go head-to-head. It does seem, though, Matt, that right now there are 6 teams for 4 spots, and the 2 Pac-12 teams could kind of decide it amongst themselves. The 2 Big Ten teams could do the same. Right now, Texas and Oklahoma are on the outside. Alabama's on the outside. And I'm not saying a team outside the top 6 couldn't get their way into the top 4, but it does seem like we've had a little bit of separation, and you could kind of see a path to maybe the Big 12 not being in, and the Pac-12 just hoping that they get one team in.
Brett, you've been in on some of the most interesting topics in college football really over the last couple of weeks. I mean, you called Michigan's 49-0 win at Michigan State. That's not an interesting game, but the scouting scandal really exploded that week. You see this crazy game in Berkeley last week. Now you're going to the Big 12 for the next couple of weeks. You get maybe the last Bedlam game ever this Saturday. I mean, I would expect it's a great game. And honestly, I think Oklahoma State's got a really good shot in this one.
No, I do too. Ollie Gordon's been amazing. He's probably the best running back in college football. And a guy who, during their loss to South Alabama, when Oklahoma State was crushed by South Alabama, carried 3 times for 12 yards. And right now he's leading the country. He's had a couple of multiple 200-yard games. And it's going to be curious because I always enjoy the subplot of college football sometimes as much as the game. And obviously in Oklahoma, the storyline has to be the last Bedlam. And I will say that Coach Gundy and Coach Venables have done an amazing job trying to downplay this as best they can, while the entire state does anything but. And even Gundy finally said this week, I don't think we'll ever play again in the regular season. Maybe in a bowl game, we'll play again sometime in the bowl game, whatever, down the road. But for this state, this is what's terrible about this consolidation in sports. It's the rivalries. I mean, last week, USC and Cal had played each other 110 times. Who knows if they'll ever play again? And who knows when we'll have another Bedlam again, and it certainly won't be in the regular season. So I enjoy the subplot, and I will say, if Oklahoma State gets a lead or they have a chance to win late, that's going to be an atmosphere probably unlike any I've seen because of the hatred. And And I saw a little bit of that a decade ago, or I guess 2 decades ago, when A&M and Texas stopped playing because they haven't played since. It's a shame, and the only thing that's bringing them back together is being in the same conference. So for Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, it's sad it has to come to this, but I know I will enjoy the spectacle of what could be the final bedlam.
Brett, we know Saban talks about having more relief than joy getting victories, and we see one of his proteges. You see Dabo Sweeney out at Clemson right now, and the sky's kind of falling out there. What is going on with Clemson? Are they still a top-tier program, or is Dabo's days numbered?
Well, I don't think they're a top-tier program anymore. I mean, they're kind of living on the fumes of a couple of national championships. And man, I think it was the first week we had this conversation, or maybe week 2, and you said to me of the 2 great coaches from not that long ago, Saban and Dabo, which one's in the most trouble or jeopardy? And I said Dabo, and I'm glad I did, because whether it's his reluctance to change a little bit, whether the fact that his former DC is now coaching Oklahoma probably doesn't help, but the true mark of these great coaches is how do they adapt. And I think what Coach K did in basketball with Duke, the kids changed, and he had to change. And you're recruiting a different kid than you were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. How do you stay kind of ahead of the game, so to speak, or ahead of the curve? The great ones can figure out how to do it. And I thought Dabo, with his relationships and his communication style, would be somebody that could do it. But he's had a rough couple of years, and quite honestly, they're no longer relevant in a conference that's really kind of searching for relevancy. So when you look at programs, there have to be 15 more than you would throw out there that are consistently a 9 to 11 game winner. And right now, Clemson's kind of on the outside looking in. And it's weird because they were so dynamic, but maybe it's because they had 2 great quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson can really elevate a program. And right now, they do not have anything close to that type of quarterback.
Well, that's a good point, too. I mean, you think of those receivers they had, too. They had some defensive ends, but, Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, they had some talent. They're not getting the same talent there anymore.
They aren't, and I guess that's a question you have to ask. I mean, sometimes you understand why you're winning when you have great players, but then why does the pipeline stop? Are you losing coaches that are your evaluators? Are you making bad decisions? Are you not making the right decisions? And then the other part is the one thing that all these coaches are dealing with right now. It's one thing to miss on a recruiting class. That portal is there for you. And Clemson, well, I just said they're probably not in the top 15 of programs. They should be at a top 8 or 9 list of programs that have a lot to offer when it comes to facilities, possible NIL, a path to the college football playoff coming out of the ACC. But they've not figured out how to articulate that to kids to get them to come in to fill the gaps that they're no longer getting these top-tier players.
Brett, give me some thoughts on the World Series. This was an interesting postseason. We had a team go 11-0 on the road through 4 levels of playoffs. That's kind of amazing. You and I both know people with the Rangers, and I think with the D-backs too. So it's not like I was rooting for one or the other. I kind of was rooting for Arizona just because I liked the way they played, the small ball and everything. But that all went away in the last few days, and I wonder what you thought about was Christian Walker testing Adolis Garcia's arm the turning point of the series, because it certainly seemed like it was to me.
I suppose it's easy to point back to that. I think Arizona just failing to hit enough in these last 3 games. It's hard to imagine a Texas Ranger team that probably lost their best player in Adolis Garcia to injury, and probably their most recognizable starter to injury in the same game, and just don't miss a beat. And Phil, we talked last week. I don't know if you and I, we can watch baseball for another 30 years and not see a 7-game series like we saw in the ALCS where the road team wins all 7 games. I don't know if we'll ever see a team go 11-0 in the postseason. I mean, it's just crazy to think about winning every single road game. And Bochy said it best, I think, this morning on SportsCenter. The last series of the year, a 4-game series in Seattle, all they have to do is win 1 more game. They're division champs. They come home. They have a few days off. They lose 3. They have to fly to freaking Tampa Bay and start a series in a couple of days. And what should have been kind of a death note for them turned into something that propelled them forward. Arkansas baseball is one of the best in the country, but they don't go 11-0 through the SEC going to play at LSU or Ole Miss or Mississippi State. You expect a few losses, but credit to the Rangers for being able to win away from home, because we may never see that again, or we won't for a very, very long time.
A big one. There's a couple big ones in the SEC this week, but LSU, Alabama, as big as they come, LSU wins this game. They control their destiny to represent the West there. Do you think LSU can go into Alabama, or you think Alabama can at least put up the points that LSU can put up with this week?
It does feel like Alabama has had enough to win some games. This is quietly, Matt, maybe the best game not getting a lot of attention outside of, say, our region of the country, because whether it's Georgia maybe facing an adversary in Mizzou, or you've got Oklahoma State, even Kansas State, Texas, a ranked matchup, and then Washington, USC out west, there's some really good ranked matchups. But this is a fun one because, Bama's probably not as strong as they have been. LSU has the better quarterback. But I'd be hard-pressed, or at least I'm not going to pick against Alabama until they force me to, because I think Saban revels in trying to figure out ways to win games when he doesn't have the talent he did from a couple of years ago, too, because now it's more on him than it is his players, and he's come out on top a lot more often than not. So I would probably still watch this game and feel like LSU needs to make a step forward and win, but they're on the road, and Alabama's still Alabama. But that's a really quietly good game this week in the top 20.
Well, you saw LSU beat Mizzou. You've seen Georgia beat Auburn. Any shot for the Tigers to take down the Bulldogs in Athens this Saturday? I think there's a chance, but I'm only saying there's a chance.
Right. I mean, there's a possibility. There's a chance. And, we've talked a couple of times. I felt like Mizzou should have knocked off LSU, and that would make this rivalry, or this game at least, much more attractive. But one thing about Georgia, there's been a couple of times where it's looked like they've been sleepwalking this year, and when they've had to wake up, boy, they have, and they've put forth some of their best performances. And without Brock Bowers for the foreseeable future, and with a quarterback who's still not as good as what they've had in the past with Stetson Bennett and others, I will be watching this game as best I can, because I want to see if Mizzou can make that step forward. But I still think Georgia is the team to beat, and it's possible that they go through this year and they win a lot of close games after winning a lot of games in impressive fashion last year and have the same result, even though probably don't get quite the style points that we're used to them putting up.
Brad, I'm going to play a quick game with you. First Texas Ranger you think of. Mine's Jim Sundberg. How about you?
Well, you took mine because he's a Hawkeye, and Jim Sundberg. Probably Pudge, because he was one of my favorites when I got a chance to be with him for a year or two. Jeff Burrows would be another one, but I'd have to pick Pudge.
Why are we thinking catchers originally? Because I was a catcher and I had a Jim Sundberg mitt. That's why I'm thinking him. That's the only reason I'm thinking him.
He took Iowa to the College World Series. That'll never be done again either.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.